There are machines built to protect. Machines that carry the weight of responsibility on their shoulders, meant to traverse places humans dare not go. Among these creations, submarines stand as a testament to human engineering and resilience. Designed to endure the unimaginable pressures of the deep, they are perfect in their purpose, silent, powerful, and relentless. And yet, beneath their sleek metal exteriors, even the strongest machines can succumb to forces they cannot understand. The submarine in question, one of the latest models, was not just a machine. It was an institution. Built for a mission of great importance, its design boasted state-of-the-art sonar systems, reinforced hulls, and the finest equipment available. Equipped to navigate deep waters, it was sent on a reconnaissance mission deep into enemy territory. The task was simple: gather intelligence, observe, and report back without being seen. To the crew, it was a job like any other. The crew, too, was a well-oiled machine. Every officer, specialist, and enlisted member had years of experience, each one a vital cog in the mechanism of the operation. The captain, a man who had led successful missions time and again, stood at the forefront. His reputation was built on his ability to stay calm under pressure. A seasoned leader, with a steady hand guiding his crew through some of the most dangerous assignments on Earth. The crew trusted him, and the mission seemed destined to unfold as planned. As the ship was readied for departure, the men aboard were focused, doing what they had done countless times before: tightening bolts, testing sonar, ensuring the communication systems were flawless. The routine, efficient work left little room for anything other than the task at hand. But even in this quiet confidence, there was a whisper, a hint of something unknown, something none of them could have prepared for. The mission was clear: head into the depths of the ocean, complete the reconnaissance, and return to port without incident. The journey would take days. The submarine would dive deep, where sunlight could not reach, where the pressure outside would be overwhelming. But that was the point. No one would detect them. They would be silent, invisible to all who might look their way. On the surface, all was calm. The submarine was gliding effortlessly through the ocean's surface waters. The crew moved methodically, performing their final checks. The captain stood on the bridge, surveying the horizon, ensuring everything was in order. This was routine, the start of what would be another successful mission. Nothing stood in their way. Nothing was out of place. As the submarine descended, passing through the surface layers of water, the crew began to settle into their work. The hum of the engines provided a constant backdrop. The sonar operators scanned for any signs of enemy vessels. The communications officers kept their channels open, confirming with the surface that all was well. Inside, the air was heavy with the sound of focused work. The routine was comforting. The mission was simple. As the sub sank deeper, the ocean began to shift. The water around them grew darker. The light from the surface receded, and the pressure outside increased. Every meter they descended was a reminder of how small and fragile they were against the immensity of the ocean. But that was part of the submarine's purpose: to withstand, to endure, and to operate undetected. It was the quietest time of the mission, the calm before the storm. The crew, efficient and focused, had no reason to suspect what was coming. They descended, moving toward their objective, toward the unknown depths where light could never reach, and the world above was just a distant memory. Everything felt routine. The deeper they went, the more isolated they became. The ocean around them pressed in, an unyielding mass of water. Yet, the crew felt safe within their steel walls. Their training had prepared them for everything, but no training could prepare them for the presence that awaited them. As the submarine began its descent beneath the ocean's surface, there was nothing unusual about the journey. The crew was in perfect rhythm. The sonar systems hummed steadily, the mechanical systems functioned as expected, and the deep ocean around them remained silent, just as they had been trained to expect. The water was calm. The pressure outside began to build, but nothing the submarine wasn't built to handle. Every second was calculated, every movement deliberate. As the vessel sank deeper into the abyss, it was as though the ocean had accepted it, as if the sub were just another piece of machinery drifting into the vast nothingness. The crew performed their tasks with precision. The sonar operator's eyes moved rapidly over the readouts, eyes constantly checking for disturbances in the data. The engineers in the engine room monitored the systems, their faces a portrait of calm concentration. The rest of the crew adjusted their equipment, adjusting periscopes, checking pressure systems, and ensuring the navigation was on course. Every piece of the vessel was scrutinized, every procedure executed with military precision. But despite the outward calm, the pressure of the ocean was not just physical, it was psychological too. The deep, vast, unforgiving dark weighed on the crew's minds as the ocean around them became more foreign, more unnerving with every passing moment. Then, without warning, the first subtle disruption. It began with the sonar. A slight flicker in the readings, a trace that shouldn't have been there. At first, it was dismissed. The sonar operator adjusted the settings, thinking the issue was simple interference. But it happened again, and then again. The readings were faint, erratic. The pattern wasn't right. It wasn't like any anomaly the crew had trained for. The disruption, too brief to identify, left the crew uneasy. The first whisper of something wrong, but nothing they could pinpoint. The issue should have been resolved with a few adjustments, but this time it wasn't. The engine room's reports came next. Small glitches, nothing dramatic, but noticeable. The submarine's propulsion system started showing irregularities in its speed, causing a slight slowdown. The crew, trained to troubleshoot, went to work, immediately checking the engine room, inspecting the systems, the turbines, the propellers. Everything appeared in order. No malfunctioning parts. No errors in the system logs. The numbers didn't add up. It wasn't just the mechanical failures. The communication system began to glitch as well. The radio crackled, sending bursts of static, an occasional odd sound too distorted to identify. The communications officer twisted knobs, adjusting frequencies, trying to make sense of it, but the signal remained weak, interrupted. The issue should have been minor, but it continued to persist, and with each new malfunction, something began to shift within the crew. At this point, the crew had no choice but to admit that something was wrong. But there was no clear answer, no singular issue they could isolate. Every technical failure seemed to ripple into another. Sonar malfunction, engine delay, radio interference, even the internal lights flickered unexpectedly. The crew began to communicate more frequently, trying to figure out whether they were dealing with a system failure or something beyond their understanding. Despite their best efforts to troubleshoot, the problem only grew worse. The sonar readings remained inconsistent, a constant fluttering presence on the screens that couldn't be explained. The crew worked together, trying to clear the interference, recalibrate the systems, but nothing worked. There was no malfunction they could pinpoint. No physical damage, yet the equipment continued to malfunction. It was as if something was outside the reach of their understanding, something neither mechanical nor natural. As the malfunctions continued, so did the mounting pressure on the crew. The initial discomfort grew into a collective anxiety, something unspoken yet felt by all. The temperature in the submarine seemed to fluctuate, though there was no explanation for the sudden cold patches in certain areas. The crew worked tirelessly, troubleshooting each problem as it arose, yet the problems only seemed to multiply. The sonar, the engines, the communications, no one could explain why everything was failing simultaneously. Crew members began to show the strain. Tired eyes, sharply spoken words. It was more than just the technical failures. It was the pressure of not knowing, of being trapped in the ocean's depths with no clear answers. Something wasn't right, and they all felt it. Even the captain, who had steered through countless missions before, was now grappling with an unease he couldn't ignore. The air was thick. The hum of the engines, once a comforting background sound, now felt oppressive. Something was changing inside the vessel, and it wasn't just the equipment. As the hours wore on, the crew's unease deepened. Trust began to fray. Small arguments broke out. The crew, once tightly knit, now questioned their every decision. Was it simply mechanical failure, or was there something more? Something they could not see, but could feel creeping ever closer. The mission had been progressing as planned, the vessel cutting through the ocean's depths with unrelenting precision. The crew was absorbed in their work, comfortable in the routine of the mission. But then, without warning, the steady hum of the engines stopped. a jolt, followed by an eerie silence. At first, it was imperceptible, a slight hesitation in the engine's roar, but soon it became undeniable. The submarine, once a powerful force in the deep, had halted, and it wasn't moving again. No loud crash, no sudden failure, just a deep, unnerving stillness. Immediately, the crew sprang into action, the professionals they were trained to be. The captain called out orders, voices sharp and steady. They attempted to restart the engines. Nothing. They inspected the propulsion system, checking wires, power grids, trying to diagnose the issue. The engineers worked tirelessly, analyzing every readout and visual indicator in their systems. But the result was always the same. The submarine sat motionless, dead in the water. The crew exchanged quiet words, but no one could speak the truth that lingered in their minds. This was no mechanical failure, no simple breakdown. This was something far more unsettling. The submarine was stuck, but why? What caused it? There were no apparent issues, no malfunctions in the system, no alarms. Everything seemed to be in order, but the sub remained unmoving, and that question, that gnawing uncertainty, began to eat at them. Communications with the surface are cut off. Each attempt to re-establish contact with the surface was fruitless. The radio crackled, but only distorted fragments of sound reached them. Words buried in static, incoherent whispers, and then complete silence. The crew exchanged uneasy looks. Was this a mechanical fault, or was there something more to this? The further they ventured into the deep, the harder it became to explain the absence of communication. It wasn't just a breakdown, it was a complete disconnect. As the realization of their isolation sank in, the crew's focus intensified. They split up, scouring the submarine for any sign of what could be causing the malfunction. Engineers dived into the systems, checking cables, rewiring components, running diagnostics. The sonar was checked again, as the crew tried to detect any nearby vessels, but the system remained oddly still, as though it were also unsure of what was happening. The engines were still dead. No cause, no reason, nothing was making sense. Hours passed, but no solution came. Every test and adjustment only yielded more confusion. Systems that should have been working fine were malfunctioning without any logical explanation. The crew had anticipated some minor issues, but this was far beyond routine problems. It was as if something was deliberately keeping them there, trapped in the abyss of the ocean. The frustration grew, and so did the unease. A sense of helplessness began to pervade every movement, every word spoken. Something was wrong, something no one could understand, and as they tried to fix it, the air inside the submarine grew heavier. The air was thick with frustration. The crew members exchanged glances, but no one spoke the words on their minds. There was no logical explanation, no malfunction they could fix. The systems had stopped responding, but nothing physically was wrong. The submarine, a piece of machinery designed to conquer the depths of the ocean, was now helpless. There was nothing they could do. They were stuck with no reason why and nowhere to turn. The situation worsened as more equipment began to malfunction. The sonar continued to falter. The readings were erratic, the numbers spinning out of control. The temperature in the control room shifted, growing colder. Lights flickered overhead, an annoying hum filling the air, unceasing, unsettling. The crew continued to check systems one after another, but no matter what they did, they couldn't reset the equipment. The control panels blinked uselessly. The screens filled with static, and alarms went off at random, only to die down to silence once again. They tried everything: restarting the engines, recalibrating the sonar, resetting the communication arrays, but every attempt only made matters worse. The systems malfunctioned in unpredictable ways, as though they were beyond anyone's understanding. No explanation, no answers. They were losing control, and no one could figure out why. The submarine had become a prison, a machine designed to carry its crew through the oceans, but now it was trapping them. The once reliable systems had betrayed them. No matter how much they tried, no matter how hard they worked, they couldn't regain control. The crew was now fully aware of the truth. They were alone, stranded in the heart of the ocean, with no way to escape and no understanding of what was keeping them there. The ocean around them had become a vast, cold expanse, and they had no way to fight it. As time passed and the isolation grew more suffocating, the crew's first instinct was to reach out. Desperation set in as the crew attempted to make contact with the surface, to send a distress signal that would call for help. The radio crackled to life, but what followed was not the familiar hum of communication. It was the distorted, unsettling noise of static, fractured fragments that offered no clarity. The crew adjusted frequencies, recalibrated equipment, their fingers trembling as they worked. But each attempt resulted in nothing more than white noise, broken syllables swallowed by the ocean's abyss. The radio operator's eyes moved frantically between the instruments, his face pale under the flickering lights. He could hear the sounds of his own breath, the space between each transmission stretched too long. Then, out of the static, a voice emerged. A garbled whisper, almost unintelligible, but the words were unmistakable. "You've gone too deep." It was the last message. It was all they heard before the signal was lost again. In the wake of the failed communications, the crew turned their focus back to the submarine itself, only to find something far more unnerving. One of their own had disappeared. His name was on the roster, his presence in the log, but when the crew searched for him, they found only his empty bunk, his equipment untouched. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints leading away from the area, no obvious clues, just an absence, a space where he should have been. The remaining crew members, at first, dismissed the disappearance as a simple mistake. Maybe he wandered off, or perhaps lost track of time. But as hours passed, their initial uncertainty gave way to growing panic. They conducted a search of the submarine, scouring every compartment, every narrow passageway. The sub's corridors, once familiar, now felt like a maze. No sign of him, no trace, just a vacancy where he had been, and a creeping suspicion that this was no ordinary disappearance. As time passed and the missing crew member's absence remained unexplained, something darker began to take hold. The missing man was no longer just a mystery. He became a question that each member of the crew could not avoid. Was he lost, or had something else taken him? The uncertainty festered and distrust began to grow. The crew members, once focused on the task at hand, now found themselves questioning each other. Who knew where he went? Who was hiding something? And what if they were being watched? It wasn't just the missing man, it was the air of suspicion that followed. Conversations, once routine, turned into confrontations. The crew, tightly knit and professional, found themselves unraveling at the edges. One by one, they began to act out of character. The captain, usually calm, snapped at his officers. A technician, once diligent, started muttering to himself about strange readings. Even the most seasoned crew members began to speak in hushed tones, their every decision now second-guessed. What had started as a mechanical issue had now spiraled into something far more dangerous, something they couldn't name but couldn't escape. As the days passed, the absence of the missing crew member and the escalating tensions began to eat away at the group's resolve. The captain tried to maintain order, but even he couldn't ignore the growing unease. They could no longer operate in the same way. They could no longer rely on the bond of trust they had shared before. What had once been a well-oiled machine now felt like a fractured collection of individuals, all staring at the same unknown, all wondering who would be next. Years passed since the submarine vanished without a trace. The world moved on, but for those who still remembered, the mystery lingered. The disappearance was labeled an accident, an unsolved case, until years later, a new team of researchers embarked on a mission to uncover the truth. Armed with advanced technology and a sense of determination, they set out to find the wreck, to search the ocean floor where the submarine had disappeared, to answer questions that had gone unspoken for too long. They knew the odds. Recovering a wreck this deep, after so many years, would be a monumental challenge. Yet, against all expectations, they found it, undisturbed, resting at the ocean's floor, as though waiting for them. The submarine, silent and still, lay beneath the waves, almost exactly as it had disappeared. No visible signs of damage, no broken pieces, just the dark, cold expanse of the deep ocean around it. The team descended into the depths, the weight of the ocean surrounding them. As they neared the wreck, their hearts raced. The submarine was nearly untouched, its hull intact, its form almost perfect. The years of exposure hadn't corroded the steel. The deep sea had preserved it in a way that defied logic. The wreck, in all its eerie stillness, seemed as if it had just been abandoned, no signs of struggle, no indication of a violent end. Inside, the crew made an unsettling discovery. The submarine's interior was frozen in time. Equipment remained in place. Documents lay scattered on desks, untouched. Even the crew's personal items were still there: clothes, photographs, belongings. It was as though the crew had simply vanished. One moment they were there, and in the next, they were gone. The crew had disappeared, leaving no trace, no sign of what had happened. It was as if they had stepped out and never came back. The team searched through every compartment, examining the items and trying to piece together what might have occurred. But nothing explained it. No message, no indication of a struggle. The submarine was too intact, too well preserved to suggest an accident. Something more profound was at play. As the investigation continued, the recovery team began to uncover more unusual findings. Markings on the walls, etched into the steel. Symbols, not in any language they recognized. Mysterious, disjointed lines that didn't seem to fit the vessel's design. And in the control room, discrepancies in the way the systems had been arranged. Wires loosely hanging, panels slightly askew, as though someone had been there but had never finished their work. Every new discovery raised more questions. The discrepancies in the vessel's systems, the strange markings, they didn't add up. The crew, experienced and professional, should have never missed these details. The systems, when activated, seemed to show signs of tampering, yet there was no clear sign of forced entry, no obvious damage. The recovery team was left grasping for answers, but none would come. Every piece of the puzzle left them more confused than the last. Some answers remain buried in the depths, locked away by the vast and unforgiving ocean. The truth, it seems, is lost to the abyss. The submarine, its crew, and the events of that ill-fated mission remain concealed beneath the waves, beyond the reach of those who seek answers. And in the silence of the ocean, the mystery lingers, as if waiting for another to come looking.